The land of Beulah. The bitch was a mystery. She didn't look mixed, more like some breed that hadn't yet been discovered. Strangers on the street were forever trying to guess her background. They studied her appearance and behavior for clues. But with each guess, her identity seemed to shift. In the face of such uncertainty, people saw what they wanted to see. Black folks thought she was mostly Rottweiler. White folks swore she was Gordon Setter. Puerto Ricans usually guessed an unlikely blend, such as a German Shepherd or a miniature poodle, while the Arab guys at the bodega predicted she would grow into a wolf. The Korean grocer kept his distance, swearing she was the same kind of rare, vicious foxhound that had bitten him as a child. Jackie wasn't sure who to believe, or whether she cared. Mixing, she understood, was a game of risk. A mutt could turn out pretty, or pretty damn ugly. The bitch had won at least one round of Russian roulette. She was lovely. Shiny black fur, long satiny ears, and little brown dots above her eyes that gave her a perpetual look of fierce concentration. Jackie had stumbled upon the dog quite by accident one autumn afternoon while she was out jogging. Brooklyn was almost beautiful that day. A frenzy of disparate colors along brownstone-lined streets. But Flatbush Avenue was ugly as ever. Seasonless, it stretched out before her, a clutter of extinguished signs and dented vehicles. Jackie moved fast, trying not to notice the men who beckoned to her, gesturing to their loins as if offering fruit for sale. She kept her eyes fixed steadily on a giant billboard ahead. It was an advertisement for Newport cigarettes. But there were no cigarettes in the picture. Instead, it showed an ecstatic black woman holding a pin to the gigantic pink bubble emerging from her boyfriend's mouth. His eyes were wide open in mock fright. The words across the bottom of the billboard read, "Alive with pleasure." Jackie found the image disturbing and looked away. That's when she glimpsed the puppy. It stood out, incongruous, a spot of life amid an urban squalor. It was tied to a metal pole by an extension cord so tightly that it couldn't properly sit or stand. Yet it grinned and squirmed excitedly at the sight of Jackie approaching. Attached to the dog's collar was a piece of torn cardboard with the message crudely scrawled in orange marker. "Take me home," it said. Jackie felt a surge of pity for the creature that took her by surprise. She reminded herself that the problem wasn't hers to solve. After all, there were stray mongrels all over Brooklyn, scrawny, mangy creatures who wandered through traffic wearing brindled coats and crazed, terrified grins, searching for some pack that had long since been disbanded. She'd heard on the news that the problem was worse in autumn. When the weather began to change, people grew tired of puppies they had enjoyed all summer and set them loose on the city. Jackie had noticed them everywhere, in parks, under bridges, in doorways of abandoned buildings. She'd also noticed the women who saved them, stray women. Jackie had glimpsed them around her neighborhood, wandering through traffic, wearing sensible shoes and foundationless faces, tugged along by a pack of dirty mongrels. Jackie wasn't one of them. Yet, as she stared down at the creature wearing the pitiful sign, she had to wonder if it had been placed in her path for a reason. She was recently single, unhappy, homesick for some land she couldn't quite remember. 1 year into her job search, she was still temping. She lived alone. She exercised alone. She ate her dinner alone, at night in front of rented movies. She occasionally went to parties alone and left alone. Nobody with whom to talk over the evening. Sunday mornings were the worst. She awoke awash with grief, imagining a city full of couples frolicking playfully under puffy duvets, surrounded by newspapers and pastel mugs containing pale, sweet coffee. Jackie leaned down and began to struggle with the extension cord, attempting to free the puppy, She heard somebody yell, "Sucker!" and whipped her head around to see who had spoken. A grown man on a child-sized bicycle cruised down the sidewalk in her direction. He leaned forward with his elbows raised to his sides like chicken wings, his knees pumping to his shoulders. He didn't meet her gaze, and she wondered if she was imagining things. But when she turned back to the puppy, she heard it again. "Sucker!" She looked over her shoulder. The man had already whizzed past and was cruising down the hill out of sight. A few minutes later, Jackie stumbled up Fulton Avenue toward her building, carrying the trembling animal. She felt flushed with good Samaritan pride and couldn't help grinning goofily at strangers. They didn't smile back. A teenage boy loitering in front of a Kansas Fried Chicken shouted out, "Don't your dog know how to walk?" Farther up the road, two old Caribbean women shuffled past her. One of them muttered, "Now that's what I call devotion." Jackie sensed sarcasm in her tone. She smiled anyway, as if the woman had meant it. It had been 2.5 months since she'd been dumped. Kyle was his name, but everybody called him Kip. He was tall, light-skinned and dreadlocked, with a mole the shape of Italy on the small of his back. He had gone to prep school all his life, and had only late in college discovered his negritude. Now he was a stockbroker. He claimed he wasn't really working for the man. He was just making money so that later, when he joined the revolution, he'd have something to offer. When Kip told her it was over, Jackie had been taken by surprise. But as she thought it over, she saw that there had been warning signs. Every time he saw her, he'd find fault with something about her. Her feet were calloused when he touched them. Her breath smelled of garlic. She had a pimple on her chin. He had refused to hold her hand when they walked through black neighborhoods, explaining that while he knew she was black, strangers might think otherwise. Jackie was the product of a black saxophone-playing father and a white soul-singing mother. She'd come out looking like the missing link between Sicily and Libya. Cab drivers liked to claim her as part of their race just before they asked her if she was married. In the summertime, she was the color of well-steeped tea. In the winter, she was paler, as if a dollop of milk had been added, although her hair, a tangly mass of wiry curls, always gave her away. Kip liked her to wear it out around her face so that people would know. Kip didn't believe in race mixing. He thought brothers who dated white girls should be called out in the street. But what if they really love each other? Jackie had replied weakly, thinking of her own white mother and black father who'd hated each other for as long as she could remember. I mean, live and let live, right? He laughed at her and patted the top of her head gingerly. There are casualties in every revolution. He'd broken up with her at a soul food restaurant in Brooklyn over a shared dinner of ribs, greens, and macaroni and cheese. "You can walk away from this anytime," he said out of the blue, sweeping his arm around the restaurant, although she knew it was blackness he was referring to. "For me, there's no way out." She rested her gaze on the baby back ribs in front of her. It looked gruesome to her all of a sudden, evidence of a crime. After Kip told her it was over, he walked her to the subway, chivalrous till the bitter end. It was cold outside, and an old man dressed in a three-piece suit stood on the corner nearby, waving a Bible and raving about homosexuality. Kip had buttoned up Jackie's coat in an oddly paternal gesture, then punched her lightly on the chin and said, "Don't worry, Jack. I'm doing you a favor." She sucked her teeth and looked away. What's that supposed to mean? She longed for the comfort of her bed. She would cry later, under her duvet, out of his sight. For the moment, at least, she had to be hard. Kip shrugged and stared at the ground, as if reading her future in the patchwork of chicken bones and candy wrappers. "Just wait and see," he said. "You'll end up with a white boy named Jake, an architect, or maybe a painter. You'll move to Nyack together and live in a big farmhouse. You'll remember me as a phase you were going through. Just wait and see." Girls like you never stick. Jackie wanted to remind him that it was he who was leaving her. But instead, she simply listened and wondered if what he said was true. Would she end up with a white boy named Jake in a farmhouse in Nyack? Didn't sound so bad, especially the part about the farmhouse, but she had tried to look disgusted by the life he described.